The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. All right, yeah, I know, my bad. I talked a lot of smack on Friday about getting an episode out on Monday, so I do apologize because I did not do that. But that's okay. That's okay. Here we are, Tuesday morning, April 15th, tax day. If you have not filed your taxes, just file an extension. Super easy. I actually do that a lot. I'll file an extension. That'll give me time to October 15th to properly handle my business. And ironically, they say that there's data that says that the IRS audits less for extensions because they basically deem people, I don't know, I guess paying more attention and doing it right. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true or not. That's probably like one of those things that these companies that are in the business of doing tax extensions, it's like a stat that they put out, That's hilarious. It probably is, actually, because more and more I'm realizing that stuff is so, it's so plausible. It really is. It's kind of like what we've talked about in terms of, the moving the goalposts of the top line cholesterol number coming down from 400 to 300 to now 200 to where, you're like a world-class athlete like myself, just kidding, and you have high cholesterol. But then when you really delve deep into that, you realize it's because of exercise, it's because of potential intermittent fasting, it's because of, exterior factors that, quite frankly, negate that 200 top line cholesterol number. So anyway, all right, listen, let me start out. I listened to that Trump Netanyahu press conference again over the weekend while I was getting steps in. It was a 50-minute press conference, and I listened to it while I was on the treadmill doing incline, by the way. I have added incline to the mix. And so, for example, on that, I did 30 minutes regular, and then I did 20 minutes on incline, 10 minutes on 5%, and then 10 minutes on 10%. Man, that really does get you. That really does get you. I noticed my heart rate went immediately up exponentially from 0% to 5% to 10%. And my sweat factor really went up. Obviously, I don't really sweat when I'm just walking on the treadmill, at 0%, 3 miles an hour or 3.2 miles an hour, whatever. But as soon as you add that incline, you really do start to sweat. So anyway, I'm going to keep that going and I will report back on that. But anyway, I did listen to the entire thing. I'm not going to play the entire thing and narrate over it. And that's mainly because the audio on the clips that had the full press conference were not that great. And here's the bottom line. So, during the entire press conference, obviously Netanyahu and Trump are together right now. At least that's what it seems, on the exterior to be showing the world. But I don't know, man. There was just a weird energy between these two guys. And the parts of the press conference that I was going to play, but I'll just tell you what happened. Basically, Trump was talking about, it all had to do with money. Like every time he talked about money and he talked about like the billions of dollars here, the trillions of dollars here, he would kind of like look over at Netanyahu and he'd mention money and then he'd be like, "You'd like that," or you'd be up for that, or something along those lines. And again, I mean, I know nobody's going to go back and watch it, but you just have to trust me on this. There was an uneasiness in, it's almost like Trump was trying to get the digs in by saying, you want our money and I know that, so don't think I don't know that. And then by the same token, I mean, again, Netanyahu, I will say, love him or hate the guy, he's excellent at his job. He really is. He is a great politician. He truly is. And so he didn't necessarily react, but you can kind of like, if you're paying attention to like his body motion and even a little bit of expression on his face. Now, this one was harder because the cameras were not doing a great job of showing them both in the frame at the same time. But anyway, bottom line is I still do think they don't really like each other, or maybe Trump doesn't like Netanyahu. But I have to imagine if that is the case, Netanyahu probably doesn't like Trump back. You know, it's one thing to show a united front in front of the cameras, and then it's a whole other thing to see how they are. Like, for example, when Netanyahu went and visited him at Mar-a-Lago, you know, I'd be curious to see. God, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that. But anyway, regardless, it doesn't matter because obviously, as we've talked in several of an episode, you know, I don't think that I really don't think Netanyahu's the total shot caller in all of this, and I think he is definitely the point person when it comes to the Israeli side, but I do think there are powers above him that, you know, probably are calling the quote unquote shots. See what I did there? See what I did there? If you don't get that, you haven't listened to the past many episodes. And if you have, you should have got that. All right, let's move on. I wanted to play this clip from none other than Jay Slay USA. Actually, this was one of the clips that kind of like turned me on to his content and turned me on to kind of following him, which obviously led to our recording the podcast together. But he had a guest on. I can't remember or find what this lady's name was, but I think they have a very interesting bit of conversation here. And give this a listen. We've talked about this in the past, but I'm just wondering if this disconnect is ever going to kind of come to fruition and cause problems. But give a listen.
The man that we both voted for would be Donald Trump. He's never gone back on his stance on vaccines. He encouraged everybody to get it.
He's very proud of it still.
Very proud of it still to this day.
Kids are dying of myocarditis.
Okay, so
and he is proud of it.
Yeah, his base, he knows that 2/3 of his base hate his stance on this.
Yes.
So why is he still doing it?
Good question.
Does he actually believe it?
All right, so, you know, I've talked about that in the past, and man, I still can't really understand why this has not become, you know, a bigger issue. And if you remember, there was the one clip I played a long time ago, right when Trump got sworn into office, like it was like maybe January 22nd, 3rd or 4th. It was really early on. And he brought Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, into the Oval Office for a meeting, and people started booing. They absolutely started booing. There's a clip of it, you know, on the Deep Shallow Dive Instagram somewhere. But again, I don't know why this hasn't become a bigger issue, and maybe it will never become a bigger issue unless this vaccine mandating starts to rear its head. And, you know, I don't know if you guys saw, but, you know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., came out in support of the MMR measles vaccine based on this crazy little measles outbreak that is so minimal. I haven't really dug into that story very much, but I will. But the disconnect with RFK Jr. saying he's okay with the measles MMR vaccine is that literally a few years ago, he wrote a book talking about how measles was a completely contrived situation and he was against the measles vaccine. So anyway, I'll dig into that a little bit more because I do think it'll be interesting to kind of understand that. And like I said, man, where is Make America Healthy Again? Where is MAGA? It's like DOA, dead on arrival. I don't even think it ever really arrived. You know, my thoughts on that is, yeah, maybe they'll get a couple small wins, like no more red food dye in our food and all that. Okay, that's great. But that's not what this band of moms wants. You know, they got behind RFK Jr. because of the vaccine stuff. And that'll be another interesting thing to see if that base turns on him, which then would mean they're kind of turning on Trump and turning on this Make America Healthy Again. And I think the first debate was in regards to RFK Jr.'s pro MMR vaccine stance for the measles versus what he had previously talked about. So I'll bring some more information on that. Let's listen to the rest of Jeremy and this gal.
Hate his stance on this.
Yes.
So why is he still doing it?
Good question.
Does he actually believe it, in your opinion?
No, I don't think so.
Then he's got to be beholden to interests.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes God allows you into certain rooms to know people on a personal level where you get some information. And I've been a part of this community of parents and doctors who have been fighting for the truth about vaccines for a long time. So there are doctors that his family has had that I know he knows the dangers of vaccines. He has, I don't even need to decode this. He has said publicly, they are not horses, they are babies. He has said publicly, a woman took her child into the office, 2 years old. They gave him a round of vaccines, the child gone, mentally autism. He has said that. That was his quote. Donald Trump has stated that.
I was just making
Donald Trump has stated that. That is a quote of his.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, so I did want to play that clip. I've been wanting to play that for a while. Again, like I said, I think that pretty soon some things are going to, I don't know, man. I think Trump and Make America Healthy Again and RFK Jr. and these guys, and obviously, I mean, gosh, it's almost top to bottom. The Epstein files, we still don't have the Epstein files. Where are those? So that affects like Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and these guys. And, all of those campaign promises and all of those things that, one could say that's really a big part of what a lot of people voted for. Maybe not the diehards, but maybe the people that were sort of independent or on the fence and they didn't really know. Maybe they're like, okay, you know what? I really do believe in this stuff and I want this. So that swayed their vote. None of that stuff has really been addressed. Instead, obviously, this entire past 60 to 75 days has been all about tariffs. It's been all about the crazy Gaza stuff that, again, I think surprised a lot of people with the way Trump has stood on that. The Houthis stuff and bombing those guys, and that, that what was that? A WhatsApp? No, Signal, that Signal Gate, text message where the reporter got caught on it. Anyway, it's been a lot of things that are outside of what people thought was going to happen, especially in like that first 48 hours. Again, Doge and all the controversy with that. Man, I will say, God, Elon Musk went from like being loved by everybody to now, man, there's a lot of people that hate him. There were videos over the weekend, and maybe you guys have seen these, and they've been going on the past couple weeks or maybe even the past 60 days or so, but people are like, completely smashing their Teslas and destroying their Teslas, which, by the way, I think it's ridiculous. Like, you're destroying your own vehicle. What's the point of that? But, they've been destroying their own Tesla. They've been selling their Tesla. They've been donating their Tesla. I mean, listen, if you want to do that, that's totally fine. The demolition stuff is just ridiculous, along with then the vandalism that's taking place to random people's Teslas or the charging stations and all that. That stuff's outrageous. I'm not a fan of any of that stuff. There's also these giant protests that are happening. I don't know if there were any last weekend, but I know the weekend prior, there's massive protests happening again, basically protesting Trump and Elon Musk. So like, if you're Elon, man, I know he could care less, but like, it's pretty funny to see people all over the world, actually. It's not just in the United States. There were protests in London. There were protests in Germany. People all over the world really protesting you and calling you a fascist and all of that. Now, again, that's a deeper discussion, but I have to imagine, I don't know, did he expect that? I mean, to me, it all plays into, I've said it before and I'm going to keep saying it. These guys have no finesse game. And I really do think they have messaged things not properly. They have, they've played bully ball, and instead of just going issue by issue and clearly articulating the problem and the solution, it's like they're just shoving their solution down your throat. And again, like I said, in terms of this, the Doge stuff in particular, in concept, I think it's amazing, but in theory, I think it's amazing, but in application, I don't think they have rolled it out properly. And again, you have to get to a point where you just can't accept, hey, we saved $6 billion today, everybody. Oh, amazing. That's amazing. Well, where is it? Where is it? And how does that affect me? Show us the receipts, show us the money, show us exactly what's happening. That's the problem, man. It's like, it really is everything that was happening the last 4 years that the Republicans were bitching about in terms of a lack of transparency. They're now doing the exact same playbook. They're making grandiose, gigantic statements without any transparency and without any real proof. And so it's like the tables are reversed. Okay, all right, let's move on to another clip. So for those of you that follow Joe Rogan, you probably saw this or probably seen clips of it because, man, it went crazy on the internet this weekend. But Rogan had his first kind of like a debate, and he never really does this. This is kind of Piers Morgan's thing. Piers Morgan's really made, gosh, he's really made a name for himself with hosting these debates with people from two sides, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Palestine, or whatever. But Piers Morgan's really done. And honestly, I watch him. I used to watch him a lot more. I can't say I watch him as much these days, but he's really done a nice job of like bringing together different sides. But the problem is they would always, not always, but a lot of times they just ended up in like complete shouting matches that were just, honestly, it got to a point where they kind of became hard to watch and they just deteriorated into, like I said, name calling and all that. This is Piers Morgan I'm talking about. So Rogan I believe it was on Friday, he released an episode with the comedian Dave Smith, whom I've played a bunch of clips on the podcast from. I really like this guy. He's a libertarian, and he's really made a name for himself, in this geopolitical stuff over the past year. And he's Jewish, and he talks a lot about the Israel-Gaza situation. And, I'm not going to say he takes the Palestinian Gaza side, although he pretty much does. But again, it's more from the humanitarian viewpoint versus necessarily, I guess, I don't know, rights to the land viewpoint or whatever you want to call that. But he's really made a name for himself as one of the guys. And again, I guess this is up to you to decide, if him being Jewish, does that give him more credibility to be able to talk on this? And does that give him skin in the game? I think it does. I really do. I mean, no different than Elijah Kallenberg or anyone else that I've had on that is Jewish that talks that side. I mean, I do think that's credible. And I do think that's skin in the game. It's obviously more credible than I am. And it's, I don't have skin in that game. So anyway, so he brought Dave Smith on to debate this guy named Douglas Murray. And man, this Douglas Murray guy, aside from this debate, I'm not even talking about this or this stance. This guy is just so pompous and elitist and arrogant and just like a complete shill, in my opinion. And he's so difficult to listen to because he's such a snob. And what's hilarious is 90% of that is because he has a British accent. So listen to this clip from Glenn Greenwald. I've played Glenn before, and I need to play Glenn a lot more because I do think Glenn Greenwald is one of the great voices out there that deserves a bigger audience. I'm going to reach out to him. I'm going to see if I can get him on the podcast. But give this a listen. So Glenn came out with this after the Dave Smith Douglas Murray debate on Joe Rogan.
There's this phrase I once heard that I once read. It might be something that a lot of people have said. I'm certainly not the first one to say it, but it's really true. I realized as soon as I read it how true it was. I realized that when I was younger, I kind of absorbed this, that Americans automatically add 20 IQ points to any British person who speaks with a posh British accent. They all think, oh, they're so brilliant, so eloquent. And that they subtract 20% or 20 IQ points for anybody who speaks with a Southern accent, an American Southern accent. It's so true. Like people's perceptions of who's smart and who isn't are very warped by those sorts of things. And the relevance of Douglas Murray seems obvious to me, but he went on Joe Rogan's show today with Dave Smith. Joe Rogan doesn't usually have these kind of debates. It got very heated.
That's seriously such a great point. Let me jump in here real quick. You know, adding IQ points, probably more than 20 to a British accent and then subtracting IQ points for a Southern accent. Seriously, think about that. Think about even politicians with Southern accents. Like there's that, I think he's a Louisiana senator. John Kennedy is actually his name. I mean, that guy, sometimes he says some really great things, but he just has such a Southern accent. You immediately kind of like think he's dumb. I'm not even kidding. I mean, think about it. Think about yourself. If you feel that way, I would guess to say most of us feel that same way. And then you hear the guy with the Southern accent, the British accent, and just immediately you think he's like intelligent or well-spoken. That's pretty funny. I will say this, I did watch the entire Douglas Murray, Dave Smith debate. And by the way, Dave Smith just completely annihilated him. That will be a crazy long episode. I don't want to play that entire thing because it was literally a 3-hour debate. And if I narrate over, it's going to be like 4 hours. Maybe I'll see if I can find clips to do it because there was some incredibly good points that Dave Smith made. There were really no good points that Douglas Murray made. He kind of exposed himself as being just a propagandist, but I don't think it really got that heated. I'm surprised Glenn said that. Definitely not in the way Piers Morgan's stuff gets heated. They really were diametrically opposed, but I think overall they kept it pretty respectful. All right, let's listen to the rest of Glenn.
Rogan was clearly more on Dave Smith's side than Douglas Murray's side. And usually Joe Rogan's audience is pretty favorable to the show. Basically, the entire Joe Rogan audience, which again is not left-wing to put it mildly, was completely contemptuous of Douglas Murray. They could not spew enough disgust and contempt for him intellectually, politically, and personally. I don't think I've ever seen Joe Rogan's comment section be that universally disgusted and contemptuous of anybody since Matt Yglesias went on Joe Rogan's show. I mean, I like mean internet comments as much as anybody else, but like I almost felt uncomfortable reading the comment section when Matt Yglesias went on just because it was so mean, so incessantly mean, so personal. I mean, they hated Matt Yglesias. It was when he had that book out about how America should have 1 billion people in it. And they hated the book, they hated the argument, they hated him, they hated how he looked. I mean, everything about him. But it came close with Douglas Murray. And I think it's so interesting because Douglas Murray usually won't go anywhere where he's challenged in any meaningful way. In fact, after October 7th, we asked Douglas Murray to come on our show several times. And at first he was responding, pretending he would, talking about scheduling. And then he just ghosted us and disappeared and won't come on. He doesn't want to be challenged. He wants to sit back in some chair like he's in a British salon. And just he loves to hear himself speak. He thinks he's so eloquent. He knows Americans are like, oh my God, this is so brilliant. But he will never be challenged. And he was challenged today a lot by Dave Smith and Joe Rogan, and he just fell apart.
All right, that was actually a very accurate description. You know, a friend of mine over the weekend texted me and said, "Hey, out of curiosity, who are the people that you think are on point and that you follow and that you like?" And I said, that's a great question. And I said, "What do you want? Like my top 5 maybe?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well," I said, "the people that I seem to not always agree with, but that I seem to maybe share a similar mindset with and that I think do a good job of cutting through the clutter and articulating things well are." All right, let's see if you guys can guess. Who would you think my number 1 is? All right, who? I'll be curious. Actually, this is very curious. See how well you know me. Who do you think my number 1 is? And actually, I don't even know if this would be number 1, but I'd have to say the first name I would mention has got to be Candace Owens. It has to be. I guess it really has to be. So I'm curious if you thought Candace Owens. Number 2, probably, and again, by the way, this is not in order, but I'm just counting. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, I would have to say he's the number 2 person I really listen to, or he's the second person I really like to listen to. The third person I really like to listen to would probably be Tucker Carlson. I will say that. Tucker's probably 3. And then I haven't played as many clips from the next 3, but just to round it out, I would say Professor John Mearsheimer, and then this Glenn Greenwald guy. This guy's really good. I need to play more clips from him. He's really good. And then Whitney Webb. I think Whitney is somebody that I really have not talked about a lot on this podcast, but if you know who Whitney Webb is, I'm very impressed because she is legit, man. And she probably has done the absolute most thorough and best research when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. I actually found a great interview, which I think I will play of hers later this week. She's excellent. So yeah, those are probably 6 people that again I think are on point. Candace, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Tucker Carlson, Professor John Mearsheimer, Glenn Greenwald, and Whitney Webb. I guess my second team, my all NBA second team or all Ray D second team would probably start with, I do like this Ian Carroll guy. We've talked about him several times and I've played several clips of Ian Carroll. I do think that he's good. Another guy, I don't listen to these guys much anymore because I think they've just become fanboys is, Patrick Bet-David. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he's really blown up and obviously has made a significant name for himself and PBD. He goes by PBD. I've talked about him a bunch. Him and his crew, I really did like those guys. Maybe during COVID, I definitely did. And then even leading up to this election, but they've just turned into Trump fanboys. They're really fanboys. Like I feel like they've lost their objectivity because they live in Florida. They'll go to like the Mar-a-Lago events. By the way, those Mar-a-Lago events, they're so cheesy. These guys come off like such fanboys. It's actually embarrassing. It's like the group of conservative social media influencers that went to the White House and they came out holding up the white Epstein binders. And they were like, "Oh my God, all right, everybody, we've got it. It's here." And they just embarrassed themselves because nothing was revealed from those white Epstein binders that they held up. And they just got destroyed on the internet. I'm so glad. I love when people get exposed for being either fanboys or, again, just not being objective and having nuance. And I think that the entire conservative crew of social media influencers, whom honestly, I will admit this, I liked a lot of them because of their stance on COVID. I really did. I thought the Republican Party, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I thought the Republican Party in general maybe mirrored my skepticism when it came to the overall play on COVID. Again, I am not questioning the virus itself. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. I got COVID in January 2021, kicked my ass. I lost 15 pounds. And it took me out for a good, 7 to 10 days. It really did. So there's no saying that the virus was fake, but the entire process of getting it spread globally and its coming, or its emergence, coming from a quote unquote wet market where a bat bit a pendulum that bit some dude in the ass, and then that guy spread it to the rest of the world. Yeah, that's not how it happened. So, all right. Anyway, we're at 30 minutes. Let me see if there's anything else I want to play. Oh, you know what? Let me play this clip for you guys, because I actually love this clip, and I love who is talking and who he's talking about, but it's in regards to Candace Owens. So Candace Owens now is catching incredible grief from a lot of people saying that, oh, Candace now is trying to change her brand and she's now anti-Trump and she's trying to pivot and ingrain herself to the other side, which honestly could not be farther from the truth as far as her trying to ingrain herself to the other side. And I don't even think she's anti-Trump, but what she is somebody that is not being fanboy about everything. And, it blows me away that, like, how do you not respect that? You actually should respect her even more if you are a hater of hers, in that she's broken away from really the rest of the conservative right-wing Republican social media influencers whom have been vocal about supporting Trump, quite frankly, up until Inauguration Day. And honestly, her actions, quite frankly, over the past, even prior to the inauguration, but definitely after the inauguration, I give her a ton of respect. She does not go to Mar-a-Lago. She does not hold up a stupid white Epstein binder. She does not tout everything Trump is doing as great. She really doesn't. And you have to respect that. You really do. I personally do. And she's very outwardly spoken about saying it. So I give her a lot of credit for that. All right, give this a listen. I thought this guy did a nice job of summing it up. And what I love about it is it's like a random white dude talking about a black chick. Dude, I'm so racist. Oh, I can't believe you talk like that. Yeah, I talk like that because I keep it real. I don't see color.
What happened to Candace Owens? Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened to Candace Owens. Absolutely nothing has happened to Candace Owens other than her choosing to stand in the middle and point out the obvious corruption that should have been acknowledged years ago. Conservatives are now trying to cancel Candace Owens for her views on Trump's cabinet, tariffs, and also her speaking out against Israel. Which at this point, if you don't see who's really in control, then you're not only allowing yourself to be deceived, but also become a sheep and a pawn that's being used in a chess game of useless wars, which she herself acknowledged that she once was. This is a woman that literally praised Trump for the success of which he accumulated in the past, and is now noticing the corruption of which is taking place in our country. She hasn't necessarily turned her back on Trump, but she damn sure has pointed out what's been happening between Trump, Netanyahu, and Trump's entire cabinet as well, which is once again having to come to the support of a tyrannical group that is committing what so many of you don't seem to consider to be a genocide. Half of you don't even know about Israel's connection to Hamas to begin with. But yet you somehow assume that all this started on October 7th. Maybe if you actually fucking educated yourselves, you wouldn't be stuck feeding into Western propaganda. There is no excuse for what's been happening in the Middle East. And even though I haven't necessarily agreed with Candace on certain topics, I can proudly say that I support her for standing in the middle and utilizing her platform to spread a message of truth.
I'm telling you, man, I am telling you, white, normal, quote unquote MAGA people are kind of waking up to things. They really are. And they are becoming vocal. So this is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. All right, that's it for today. By the way, Wednesday, I am going to release the podcast interview I did with this guy, such a nice guy, Pastor Bob Thiel. super nice guy. He's a doctor and a pastor. We had an amazing conversation, again, talking about Christianity and a variety of things. I seriously love learning about Christianity. I feel like I have increased my knowledge base so much, and I hope you guys have as well in terms of, all the religious things. I definitely need to kind of continue down this path and see if I can get other faiths and other people on board or on the show to kind of, just give us information. Like I'm trying to get a Scientologist. I'm trying to get somebody from Scientology and somebody from the Mormon religion, as well as then a Jehovah's Witness. I've talked about, I think, all three. I haven't been able to get anybody yet, but I'm really going to try to get somebody. And it's funny, the Scientology thing, I'll leave you guys with this story. I did hear back from somebody and they had me fill out this questionnaire. And one of the parts of the questionnaire made me kind of, I guess, sign something that says my intent is not for any type of exposition of Scientology, which it's not. I seriously, I don't want to I really don't want to try to expose anything. I just want to understand what it is and have somebody come on the show and kind of explain it, explain it thoroughly and what their beliefs are and all that. I think that'd be super cool. All right. Anyway, that's it. Give a listen to the interview with Pastor Bob Thiel. I think you'll really enjoy him. Super, super nice guy and dropped a lot of nuggies. All right. Have a good day. Call Space Bait.
That was a great way to end it.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.